Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to another knockout motion here at the Nationals at the Debate Circle, graced by Mount Kenya University. And the motion of dissection reads, the fight against climate change requires a global governance framework with binding commitments to countries. I read the motion again. The fight against climate change requires a global governance framework with binding commitments to countries. All the best to both teams, and we have Ogande Girls High School all the way from Homa Bay with Mount Laverna Girls. As they're proceeding with this motion, we're building momentum for the nationals and the finals. Team proposition, first speaker, you have 3 minutes.
My environment, my health. Sounds good, right? Why must we always be enemies of progress? Why can't we just agree to bind hands together in order to find a solution to the great impacts of climate change? The fight against climate change requires global governance with binding commitments to countries. Here to propose the motion is Kuri Dache from the Ogande Girls High School. First of all, I'd like to make you familiar with the motion. What is climate change? They are the continuous change in the climatic patterns over a period of time. Global governance are the ways in which the government controls activities, both social and economic, considering all parts of the world. While a framework are a set of ideas, beliefs, or rules from which something is developed. Binding commitments are agreements to do something in a way that must be followed. I dearly love a clean and green environment. But my heart bleeds each time I see the devastating, deadly, and catastrophic impacts of climate change globally. Will our generation continue to suffer due to our inaction? It is time for us to break the silence. It is time for us to take action. That is why, without fear or favor, I firmly stand to propose the motion. To my first point, urgency and global impact. Climate change is a matter of great urgency and of great global impact. Kenya being a great example. For the past 40 years, Kenya has experienced drought. The worst drought. That is stated by the UN. Are you trying to tell me that for those 40 years, Kenya did not have any governance? Of course, Kenya had local authority. But what did they do? Sit around and misuse our funds, saying that we are working on it, we are working on it. Till when are we supposed to wait? Till when, Kenya? Go to Mozambique. Over 2,000 people have died due to Cyclone Freddy, which of course is another impact of climate change. It's time for us to break the silence. We need help. Local authorities have proved not to work in our country. Local authorities, of course, they are there to help, but are their impacts really being felt anywhere in our country? Over 2 million people are actually affected by drought in Kenya. 2 million people, for crying sake. Till when are we supposed to say that we can do it? Let's just agree. It is only fair to say Kenya is not possible. It is not possible for us to help ourselves. A problem shared is a problem half solved, my people. Agreeing to be helped does not mean you're weak. It just means that you need a little push. That extra force is what we need. Binding commitments. We have our local authorities, but they have proved not to be working. If we decide to have a global governance, maybe, just maybe, we would have saved the over 2,000 people who died in Mozambique. Maybe the things that you're facing today due to climate change would have reduced. Join me in proposing this motion and saving lives. Thank you.
They say never trust a girl with an ugly secret. As for me, I say never trust the weather without an umbrella. For centuries, everyone has thought of one key ingredient to complete the world-related stew, right? Well, you're all in luck because I have the key measure of spice so as to serve you the perfect stew of change on a silver platter. Let I, Gishina Melissa, give you a nail-biting, savoring perspective by opposing the motion dropped on the table. Shall we? On to my definition of terms. fight to try to prevent something or get rid of something unpleasant that already exists. Climate change, according to my KLB Geography Book 2, it is a continuous change of climatic states such as temperature and precipitation over time. Global governance, it is to take charge to control each and every state wholly. Framework, it is a structure of a society, a legal or a political system. Binding commitments, these are official documents which involve the collaboration between two or more parties, giving them the chance to do something. Now, it seems that Team Proposition has failed to understand the status quo. The main point in this motion is binding commitments. Now, I shall now dive in my points. Number one, hostile views concerning the whole climatic topic. Its financing, execution, and measurement has brought a significant gap between developed and developing countries, hence damaging the collaborations needed for international negotiations. Consequently, it will be tough for these diplomats to build a machinery to make more profound agreements possible in the future. Now, when you take a look at countries such as Nigeria, they have strong nationally determined contributions, NCDs. However, they have little capacity to put the whole climatic agenda into action. This is according to climateinvestigations.com. Now, let's take the lion's share of the key action, shall we? When you look at the Paris Agreement target for developed countries to mobilize $100 billion per year, it continues not to be met. And do you know why? This is because, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot simply afford, and it is completely baffling to see Team Proposition putting forth this legislation. Now, moving on to my second point. Most decisions made at a global level are not mandatory and are not implemented. This is due to a lack of a significant punishment when these countries fail to commit to the climatic pledges. Now, this is why countries such as Russia and Turkey go away scot-free when they do not implement these climatic pledges. It has so become evident that these binding punishments do little but paper when it comes to curbing climate change. Now, moving on to my third point. They pose financial strains to economies of countries. Now, this goes against the SDG of number 1, end property and poverty in all forms. These binding commitments have failed to equate emission reductions with economic status of countries. This is why countries grew to view this mitigation as a costly punishment. This is why countries like US, being in the Paris Agreement, withdrew in the year 2017 in 1st June due to such reasons. Now, do take cover under my umbrella as I shield you from the scorching lies that Team Proposition is stating. This has been your weather girl, Gishina Melissa, signing out.
It really hurts me to see people who are ungrateful. Kenya experienced drought for 40 good years. Where did your aid come from? This is from the United Nations Organization, United Convention to Combat Desertification. Why didn't you refuse? Remember, local initiatives have been there. They existed. We have the Green Belt. We have so many of them, but they are not performing their duties. And these remember Kenya has rules. We make rules, and rules are there to be broken. But with these binding commitments, the other nations will ensure that we implement these rules that we make. An equal problem requires an equal battle. That's why I stand proposing the motion that says the fight against climate change requires a global governance framework with binding commitments to country. Fiona Onyango from Ogande Girls. And my first point is global cooperation. We need to cooperate because climate change is a global problem. We need to cooperate in order to come up with one solution in order to fight this beast, climate change. Climate change is affecting everywhere, and some instances of some regions which are being affected by climate change is Pakistan, which experienced a high temperature of 50 degrees Celsius. This same Pakistan is experiencing flood. We have Spain also experiencing floods. And remember Kenya, we are suffering from drought. And it is estimated by the United Nations Organization that this is the same Kenya which experienced drought for 40 good years. Quote that, 40. Where were these organizations when Kenya was experiencing drought for 40 years? So, like Pakistan had the highest temperature of 50 degrees Celsius last year. They did not they did not fight this by themselves, but they got help from other organizations. People are being displaced by climate change. People are being directly or indirectly affected by climate change. You who are seated there, I know you might be directly or indirectly affected by climate change, and the statistics estimate that 55 million were displaced in 2020 and were affected with climate change. 59.1 million in 2021 and 71 million in 2022. So tell me, this is the estimation. It is rising, it is not going down. So coming at the end of this year, the statistics might be much higher. So this shows us that we need to come up and work together as one people. The European Union demonstrated solidarity and cooperation when they agreed to fund us developing countries in the fight against climate change. Remember, these people decided to aid developing countries. Developing countries, when I say, I mean Kenya is among them. So they decided to fund us. And remember, there's a certain amount of money, $100 billion, being given to countries that are affected by climatic crises. So Kenya is also depending on this money that is being given to us. I know there are many international organizations fighting climate change. That is the Climate Lobby Association, amongst many other associations. Thank you.
It seems that team proposition is creating a long chain alkane of lies and a food web of deceit, starting from the producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and now they want our lovely audience to be the tertiary consumer of their lies. Well, not on my watch. I, Cornelia Oluka, here to restore the ecological balance that once was by opposing the motion. The first speaker was talking about refusing help. Well, the motion states that it is a binding governance system. We do not need a binding governance system. We can clearly curb the issue that is climate change through a non-binding system. We will still get help, we will still be held accountable, only that it will be a non-binding system. And she also talked about needing cooperation at a global level. But do you know about the G20 and BRICS nation? Well, on one side we have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and on the other side we have G20 countries such as the United States. The BRICS nations are fighting for another domination and transitioning from an economy which is dominated by the US dollar to another denomination. Such countries will not sit down and agree to a binding global governance system. It will simply be impossible. Now for my first point. Each nation has very unique circumstances, priorities, and economic capacities. I'll take an example of Sudan. Sudan currently has a war, and UN reported that 330,000 people have been displaced and 100,000 people have fled to other borders. Such a country will not prioritize climate change. It will prioritize getting its citizens to a safe place and ending the war. Such a country will not participate in the binding governance system. We need a solution that will respect the national autonomy of every single country and allow for tailored approaches. Now for my second point. Equality, equality, equality. For us Africans, it is nothing but a word that we see as we peruse the dictionary. Why? Because these developed nations have shown us contempt, disrespect. For example, during the COVID-19 period, this citizen reported that African countries were last in priority for getting the vaccines. The same thing will be seen in their binding governance system. These countries which have a better economic point than us will take advantage of that. We will be facing an equality, which is the 10th G for GFDS that we are trying to eradicate. And those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. Now for my third point. I was talking about cooperation and collaboration. These countries will not sit together and collaborate and cooperate. We need a non-binding system. Non-binding system, especially for us African nations, whereby we can rise together. We do not need to depend on these developed nations. As Africans, we can rise together. We can stop the neo-colonialism that this system is clearly about to bring to our nation. It has been Cornelia Oluka. Point blank, period.
Team Proposition have been tasked that given we're recommending a global framework for solving the crisis of climate change, is it counterintuitive to have countries that haven't signed to such global frameworks, the likes of the United States of America, that have not yet signed the Paris Agreement? Team Opposition have been tasked to validate that non-binding commitments can be used to solve the problem of climate change. Where exactly has this worked, and do they have a case study where non-binding commitments have worked to solve climate change? Team Opposition, third speaker, you have 3 minutes.
To the first question, they fulfill the Paris Agreement in the European Union where they agreed to pay a certain amount. Is it not the former US President Barack Obama who said, "We are the first generation to experience the effect of climate change and the last to do something about it"? But how? Through binding commitments. My fellow had talked about a slogan, "My environment, my health." Though you haven't given us local initiatives which have done something towards climate change. Let me give you an example. In Kenya, I attended a local initiative which planned to plant trees in order to curb the climate change. But it didn't work. Here is a shirt written, "My environment, my health." I walk in around the environment wearing this shirt, but yet what I see, trees are cut down, nothing is done by the government. Instead, money finance is used in different purposes of which we don't know. I personally don't usually like group discussion, but when I started developing mediocre grades, I knew the benefit of group discussion. Nevertheless, we are being taught about partnership and sole proprietorship, where we get a sole proprietor, has poor decision making, wastes time in making decision, and bears the risk alone. Coming to partnership, partners bears all the risks among themselves and make proper decision making, and the decision made are made faster. This brings me to my point, leveling the playing field. When all countries are charged accountable for what they do towards climate change, the risks are shared equally, and everyone is held responsible for what happens. So, leveling playing field, binding commitment, ensure laid playing field by holding all countries accountable for their contribution to climate change. Without such commitment, countries may engage in a free rider behavior, avoiding responsibility and hindering global progress. A global governance framework ensures that all countries actively participate and contribute to fight against climate change. The problem with us, Kenya, is we are egocentric, and our ego can't allow us to bind commitment with other countries because they'll be considered less. That's obvious. And do you have to be hit by a lorry for you to know that it is not an interesting affair? No. Don't wait to experience drought, flood, and cyclones. Instead, bind commitment, get proper decision making from other countries and good ideas, because a mind stretched with a new idea can never go back to its old dimension. I'm Tabitha Nandi, Ogande Girls, proposing the motion that says the fight against climate change requires a global governance framework with binding commitment with countries. Thank you.
Good morning at Laverna News. For today's weather forecast, Greece is experiencing heat waves. The coastlines are proceeding in the east coast, and well, it is raining lies. So join me in my umbrella as I prevent you lovely people to be rained on this acidic type of rain, and join me in my opposition side. To answer the question, you asked that we should give an example of non-binding commitments that have worked. Well, the Kigali Amendment of 2016 led to the reduction of production of hydrofluorocarbons, which are potential greenhouse gases which deplete the ozone layer. Now, to rebuttal, my fellow proposer here came and said that there are no local organizations that are actually working to improve the climate. But let me educate you and let's be more conversant. We have the M-Taka Association. Now, the M-Taka Association is currently cleaning up the streets of Nairobi. It is planting trees, and it is going further to go to industries and educating them on the amount of gases they are emitting and how it is affecting our environment. Now, and you say that Kenya is egocentric, so they would never join organizations. But let me remind you, we are not egocentric. We joined the Paris Agreement. We are not egocentric. Now, to begin to my points, I am going to talk about enmity between countries. Now, countries like USA and China are currently showing their very, very aggressive hate. Sorry to use that, but hate for each other. Now, whatever USA does, China finds a way to top it up. So do you think that these two countries will actually come, sit down together in one room, and actually, let's sit down and actually agree on this? This will not happen. Now, let me take you a little bit further. Countries like North Korea and South Korea, they have the most evident, and I mean evident, disagreements. Now, these two countries will not just come and sit together and agree, you know what, we're going to do this. It's not going to happen. And let me remind you, you'll come and state that other countries can come and talk to them separately and bring them together. But let me ask you, if you are sitting in the same room with someone you do not, and you know very well cannot be into terms with, you will not stay there. If I were this country, I would definitely withdraw from this agreement. Now, let's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. They are focusing on Vision 2030. Now, the SDG is a form of human development in which resource use aims to meet the human needs of the present. Now, GDP, the amount at which Sudan's economy is going downhill, grew 0.7% in 2022. Now, if we implement these binding commitments with their poor economy, it would lead to a sharper decline in the economy by 2.0%. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been your host, Mutiso Alexis, signing out.
Team Proposition, you have 1 minute to give your closing remark.
My fellows, we are focusing on SDG number 13 specifically. Climate change is real. It is happening right now. It is the most urgent threat facing our entire species. And we need to work collectively together and stop procrastinating. We don't have time to sit on our hands as our planet burns. Or do you have a planet B? We don't have a planet B, obviously. For young people, climate change is bigger than election or re-election. It is a matter of life and death. So, local problems require local initiative. Climate change has become a global challenge, and a global challenge requires a global governance. And so, a global governance is not a case of one country. It requires several countries brought together to curb this climate change. And how will you do it? Obviously, through binding commitment. Thank you.
Team Opposition, we will be taking closing remarks. You have 1 minute.
It is funny how Team Proposition has been dwelling on drought. Dwelling, and I mean seriously dwelling, from speaker number 1 to speaker number 3. Yet, we have other issues affecting our environment. Now, I am going to emphasize on the SDGs. You said you're focusing on SDG number, you said 13? Yes, but the motion states climate change and it also states binding commitments. This binding commitments is also part of this motion. So we need to focus on the issues that affect the binding commitments in order to curb this climate change. Now, SDG number 10, SDG number 1, and SDG number 8. 10, equality, 1, poverty, and 8, economic growth. And mind you, in this equality, and I emphasize, as the second opposer said, we are being left behind as Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been your host, as I said, Mutiso Alexis, signing off. Game over, Team Proposition.
Ogande girls, the three of you were all very passionate debaters. I like the way your passion and conviction came out in the way you presented your points. Curie, your argument, on the other hand, you based it on Africa only. And when we have such a general motion, it actually talked of other countries. It's a global thing, so we didn't just base it on Africa alone. But either way, Africa is part of the world. Fiona, you are very confident. What I'd just like to tell you is that when you're giving your points, it's also good to relate your points to the motion. So when you give a point, try and relate it back to the motion and the side that you're proposing, either you're proposing or opposing, which side you are supporting. Tabitha, I liked you really came out through for your team. You had a very coherent argument. You had planned your points well, and in fact, for your team members, they can learn from you because you really planned your points well.
To the opposition, do we have binding committees that haven't worked? That is for you, Mount Laverna, that have really not worked, you know? That would have brought extra rich arguments to show the extra research that you have had. It doesn't mean that you're not great speakers. It doesn't mean that you didn't do a good job, but you would have gone deeper into showing that, listen, these things don't work, all right? That would have been way better. And I think a bit of quick pointers, if I may use one. I think what Oluk brought out, that is on Mount Laverna, that respect each country to tailor-make their own solutions. That was a powerful way of really speaking out and bringing it out. Mutiso as well, you had great ways of speaking it out. Well done in some of your submissions, that some countries have clear divisions, like the North, South Korea examples. So they were very good, and I think even Melissa as well. In fact, Melissa, when I have almost zero comments to make, it means you're very good, and I think that was commendable.
I'll move straight to the judges' results, and the judges have awarded Ogande girls with 67.5%. A round of applause, please, for Ogande girls. And the judges have awarded Mount Laverna with 70.3%. And the winners for this debate are Mount Laverna. We have come to the end of this debate here at the Debate Circle. Remember to check our social media handles for more of this content on YouTube, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, and as well as on Twitter at the Debate Circle. And until next time, it is goodbye from us.